Welcome to the Triple Takeover Toycast, a fortnightly podcast all about Transformers and occasionally other vintage toy lines as well. We're going to get right to it tonight because we've got an absolute legend of the Transformers sphere with us tonight. My name is Sixo. I'm joined by Jason and Liam as ever, but we also have on the chat tonight is Transformers royalty. It's Mr. Bob Budiansky.
Woohoo! Yeah.
I'm saying that right, aren't I, Bob?
You did it fine.
Okay,
Excellent. Good
Excellent.
stuff.
We just had a brief discussion about the pronunciation of Budiansky, and I'm now nervous about saying it the incorrect way. Let's put it that way.
You rose to the occasion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, let me just first say it is our absolute pleasure. We are honoured with your presence, and I must admit, when the idea first came up about asking you on, it was a bit of a pipe dream, I think, of ours. We were a bit like, nah, surely we'll never get Bob, you know. And then when you agreed, I think we were all kind of pinching ourselves a little bit just at the opportunity to sit and chat with you. Really,
yeah, it's really great. It is, and it's the community, the kind of wider community that we have for the podcast are so excited for this as well because, as Sixo says, it's Transformers royalty, but also Marvel royalty,
yes.
And I think that's the kind of important bit, and that's kind of where we want to start, isn't it, gents? To kind of cast your mind back, Bob, if you can, about what was your journey like at Marvel?
Okay, well, it was a 20-year journey, so there's a lot to cover there. But.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I mean, I can give you like the beginning and some of the highlights if you'd like. So I began at Marvel in May of 1976, and my first job there was working as an editorial assistant for the Marvel British department. Marvel British department was basically a reprint department, so we provided reprint material or previously published Marvel comics for the British comic book market. And we had to do a lot of production work on them because the British comic book market at that time was a weekly market.
Yeah, totally.
As compared to the American market, which was monthly. So a typical British comic book weekly would have 2 stories in it, 2 reprint stories of Marvel comics, and each story was cut in half. So you get like half an Avengers story and maybe half of a Shang-Chi Master of Kung Fu story.
Sure, yeah.
Something like that. And then the following week, you'd get the other halves. So we had to cut them in half. They were printed in black and white. So gray tones were added to it. Zipatone, they were called back then. These adhesive sheets of plastic printed paper. Mm-hmm. And they would add some more body to it because they had no color otherwise. And we had to change the spelling of a lot of words because British spelling and American spelling vary.
Cool.
And we also had to add new splash pages, new first pages, because we were cutting the stories in half. Yeah. The second half would need another page to launch the second half of the story. And it was a great training ground for up and coming artists. So some of the artists of that era that, you know, a couple of years later became like big name Marvel artists got started working on British comic books, doing these new splash pages and trying to imitate the style of the artist who did the remainder of the story.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
it's very cool.
Gene Colan or John Buscema or somebody like that, because those guys weren't doing the splash pages for us. It was new talent that was doing it. Anyway, so I worked there for about a year, and I went freelance, and then I came back on staff as an assistant editor on mainstream Marvel comics, and then I went freelance to do a Ghost Rider as a monthly.
Yeah.
So I was the artist on that for about a year and a half, and then I was eventually. Ghost Rider came to an end, and the Marvel editor-in-chief at that time, Jim Shooter, invited me back in 1983. We're already up from 76 to 83. He invited me back as a full editor at Marvel. And so I had like Fantastic Four, Daredevil, The Thing, you know, a bunch of movie books that popped up here and there. I was the editor of that stuff back in the 83, 84 era. And then in November of 83, this is where I guess this podcast comes in. November of 83, I was asked by Jim Shooter to get involved with working on the Transformers in the development phase of it. And so I did. I can get back to that later. But meanwhile, Marvel was getting more and more outside partnerships, movie companies and toy companies and so on and so forth, wanting to partner with Marvel to develop their properties into comic books. Basically, they looked at comic books as a marketing tool so they could sell more toys or get more people to go to the movie or whatever. And so it became such a big job. There were so many properties that were coming to Marvel through these partners that Jim Shooter created a new job among editorial as a special projects editor, and he asked me to be the first Marvel special projects editor. So I went from being a mainstream comics editor to special projects editor. So I would handle all these kind of oddball jobs that didn't fit the mainstream. And that developed over the years. So I was handling toys and miniseries and movie adaptations and the National Football League, the Marvel retail poster program. And eventually, Marvel brought in-house Marvel trading cards, which up until then had been licensed to somebody else to develop and market. So Marvel brought all that in-house. So I was in charge of the first 11 sets of Marvel trading cards in the early 1990s.
Oh, nice.
And then eventually, Marvel went through a kind of a reorganization. So there was no longer one editor-in-chief. As of the fall of 1994, I'm kind of skipping through a lot of things here.
Sure.
Marvel became decentralized. So that instead of one editor-in-chief, there were 5 editors-in-chief. And I was made the editor-in-chief of the Spider-Man line of comic books.
Wow.
So there was about a dozen comics that fell under that regime. For that period of time.
Which was quite the time for Spider-Man as well.
Yeah.
That had been the Clone Saga era.
I came into the middle of the Clone Saga.
Wow. Right into the storm.
Yeah, it was an interesting time to be the Spider-Man editor. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Like it was, wheels were already in motion. Like I just went along for the ride in a lot of ways, unfortunately.
I remember one of the funniest books I ever bought was 101 Ways to End the Clone Saga.
Yeah, it's good.
I really loved that at the time. It's just a real funny insight into stuff at the time. It's brilliant.
That might have come out after I was gone, I think.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I'm wrong.
The Clone Saga did go, didn't it?
There was a lot of repercussions. That might have been one of them.
I don't know if you're aware, actually, or if you keep up with Spidey, but it's had a little bit of a renaissance now, the Clone Saga, actually, and more recent times. They've revisited it in numerous, modern Spider-Man stories, things like that, and it's sort of become it's undergone a little bit of a paradigm shift, I think, in terms of.
Well, I know there's Spider-Gwen. I know that's a big character these days.
Yeah.
So that must be some kind of offshoot of whatever happened back in the Clone Saga.
Oh, she's been cloned multiple times, but there's multiversal stuff now and all kinds.
I struggle to keep up, if I'm honest.
Yeah. No, but to your point, I don't really keep up with the details of what goes on in comics these days.
Sure.
I don't purchase them. I'm kind of vaguely aware, like I said, of Spider-Gwen, but I've never read a story with her in it or anything like that.
No, sure, totally. Sure.
So anyway, that leads to my exit from Marvel, which is in January '96. Marvel went through its second wave of massive layoffs. Marvel was rapidly descending into bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And so in '97 it went bankrupt. So with the Marvel '96 layoffs, I was asked to move along among them.
Oh.
And so I stayed there for almost 20 years in one capacity or another. So during those 20 years, I was editor of various levels, and I was artist, and I was a writer.
It must have changed, though, such a huge amount in those 20 years, right? Like from the sort of classic like bullpen days and things like that through to what it was in the 90s. And as you said, when it kind of became more decentralized.
I mean, if you're comparing it to when you say the classic bullpen days, that preceded me. If you're talking about Dan and Jack hanging out and, Ditko and those guys, Stan popped into the office rarely. And that was when he was still living in the New York City area. And then he moved to Los Angeles, soon after I began.
Yeah.
And so we never saw him after that, except when we went to the San Diego convention, and maybe we'd stop by and visit him, where he was, which we did at least on one occasion. And so that classic bullpen there were still some people from those days working there when I began, but the actual concept of the bullpen, which was basically the production area. So the production area consisted of lots of production artists, people who corrected, artwork, corrected lettering, did paste ups. There was something called paste ups back then before there was desktop publishing. There was people cutting up things with scissors and gluing them down.
Yeah.
And so all that existed all the time I was there. The bullpen, we might have changed office buildings a couple times, but the bullpen, was always the bullpen. There was always that central production area with a production manager and, an art director and like probably, I don't know, 10, 20 people or so working in the bullpen. And then the editorial offices were kind of, circling around the perimeter of the bullpen on the perimeter of the office building. So that was pretty constant back then.
Yeah.
And see when you were working on those, like, so that early stuff that you were doing, because I remember this really well, like growing up in Scotland, we got the comics that you were then that you were kind of cutting into pieces from the American ones and then putting out onto kind of newsagent stands, because it was very different at that point in the UK when we were getting comics. It was still seen as kids stuff, and they were kind of, the way that they were consumed was different as well. But when you were doing that, who were you working with at that time, and were you kind of like having to understand the UK market, or did that not matter at that point? Was it just all about just getting these comics to another island, if you like, and kind of a new readership?
Well, some of the questions you're asking are probably way above my pay grade from back then.
Okay, yeah.
I was the editorial assistant, so if you can imagine, the guy who puts stuff in envelopes to mail out, that would be me.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So early days of Bob.
Like eventually I started doing sketches for all those splash pages that we were just talking about. For other artists to draw. So I would show them to my boss, the editor of the British Comics. At the time, that was Larry Lieber, Stanley's brother. So that was my first boss over there. And so I helped him. So when he discovered I had some art talent, actually I was told when I interviewed for the job, don't mention you want to be an artist, he'll never hire you.
Oh, wow. Really?
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I was told. A friend of mine was leaving the job and he knew of my interest at Marvel. So I replaced him basically, but he said, I had a phone, I was actually in graduate school, and he said, so I just did a phone interview. He said, don't mention you want to be an artist, because he'll know that if you want to be an artist, you'll quit at the first opportunity.
Right.
Wow.
So I didn't mention it in my phone interview, but as soon as I got there, I made it clear I wanted to be an artist. And he gave me a lot of opportunities. And so I got better and better. And a lot of those splash pages I drew, as well as people like John Romita Jr. and Mike Golden and Frank Miller. I'm just mentioning some of the highlights among the people that were working back then, just getting into comics. And so it was an interesting time to, get started, because it gave me opportunities. And after a year, I was able to fool myself into thinking that I could make a living as a freelance artist. So I quit.
Oh, right. Really? So on that, because you mentioned you went freelance. So was that freelance to pursue the artistic career at that point, was it then?
Yeah. So I was able to get some work, but not steady work out of Marvel. Mostly color separations for the British department, which is very obscure sort of skill back then. And now it's completely forgotten, pretty much. So I was able to do hand color separations and make some money that way. And then Jim Shooter showed up one day and said, "Oh, I found a cheaper way to do this." So my work disappeared.
Oh no!
But then I was soon hired back on staff as an assistant editor for the mainstream comics.
Yeah.
So as far as your original question about the British market, I don't think there was a lot of thought about what should we be doing for the British market. They just said, "Okay, here's our most popular comics: Spider-Man, the Avengers, X-Men, whatever it was." And they just, reprinted the hell out of them until, they were used up, or the comic book was canceled on the British side or whatever. And then they would reprint something else. And there was plenty of inventory to reprint. The only time that we were sensitive to the British market was I was there when Marvel launched Captain Britain.
Right.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
One of the first big things the only big thing that came up the entire time I worked for the British department, we're going to launch our own original material. I don't think anybody in our office knew anything about, Britain or the English countryside or anything. They probably saw a couple of World War II movies and that was about it.
Yeah.
So, but we were working with somebody over there in England. I didn't work directly with the guy. I guess Larry Lieber communicated with him. But there was some British office back there that was receiving all the material we sent. So I guess there was some information that was being transformed back and forth. The only thing I really remember was that we were initially told, the English are rather, what's the word? Reserved.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Reserved. I was going to say conservative, but reserved is also another one for it.
I don't know if they'll go for Captain Britain, as a name for a character, Captain England or whatever. And then we went beyond that, proposed and we're going to put the Union Jack on his mask.
Totally.
Which by the way, I designed the mask. I did design.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Amazing. It went through John Romita Sr., Herb Trimpe, Larry Lieber, and nobody could get the mask right. And then I went home one night and I said, I drew something. I said, Larry, how about this? And they liked it. So I was able to show a little bit of, I don't know, talent and gumption.
There you go.
I wasn't trying to show up all these terrific, skilled, experienced artists, but we were getting real frustrated trying to come up with a mask design. So anyway, I think that was the only thing that, where we really did have to be sensitive to the British market. And then, later on, as that storyline developed, as that series developed, initially we had, Herb Trimpe as the artist, and then we had John Buscema as the artist. We had terrific artists. And then we had Ron Wilson, who was also a really good artist. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he was very powerful, action-packed sort of characters.
Yeah.
But the thing that he wasn't one of his strengths was drawing backgrounds. So my job was to go to what was called a travel bookstore at the time. This is way before the internet, and find a couple of travel books on England so that you can get pictures, pictures to copy for the comic book, so that we have it so we could give it a sense that you are actually in England and not just some nameless background.
That's brilliant.
And then because, again, Ron's interest was mostly drawing action-packed characters, as a freelance job, I drew his backgrounds. So if Piccadilly Circus or Big Ben needed to be inserted into a scene, that was my drawing in the background.
Oh, wow.
Brilliant. That's so cool.
Beyond that, I don't think he cared what England thought.
Yeah, exactly. It's all from a book. I can imagine images of like Stonehenge or just random castles and stuff.
Stonehenge was definitely in there somewhere.
There you go. It'll be all the famous bits, won't it?
All the landmarks.
The English scene was in there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. I suppose that's the thing, though, for you, Bob, isn't it? That, for a career that, it kind of spanned that time, there'll be so many different touch points that you had in not just comics, but so many different things.
Great thing about working for Marvel is it gave me at least a lot of opportunities to try a lot of different things.
Yeah, it shows. Yeah. Let's talk Transformers. I mean, what's your first memory of being introduced to the idea of Transformers? I mean, we've seen the recreation. I'm sure you have as well in the Toys That Made Us, the Netflix show. But was it literally like that Jim Shooter just walks in?
It was pretty close. It was pretty close. So the thing they got right was Jim Shooter did indeed come down to my office and loom over me, because Jim Shooter's like 6'8" and I'm 5'.
Right. So, taller than Jason even.
Wow, beat me.
I was sitting down at my desk and he came down and he asked me if I would be interested in working on this new property called Transformers. And anyway, I said yes. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit in the story, but just to get to that scene that you're talking about from the Toys That Made Us. So I described that scene to the director and the people interviewing me for that show. And they recreated it. I even gave them a photograph of that era of what I was dressed like, and they even gave the actor something resembling what I was dressed like. The one thing they got really wrong was, I did mention to, again, the people on the show, that I wrote everything longhand on a yellow legal pad. So the show does show me, as soon as Jim Shooter exits my office in that scene, it does show me whipping out a yellow legal pad and starting to write something. That's where it went wrong.
Right.
Because what Jim Shooter gave me was a freelance job, not a staff job. I was on staff. So if I had started working freelance right away, doing this Transformers stuff, I could have gotten fired for that.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have gotten a warning or two, but basically that wasn't cool. You're supposed to do staff work when you're working in the office. So, I did that at home. I pulled out the yellow legal pad at home and wrote it all then. But, who cares? It's just a TV show.
I guess they've condensed it. Yeah. We have seen some of your famous yellow legal pads before, because again, you brought them to TF Nation one year and we got to see, you put it up on screen. We got to see a lot of the kind of notes and things like this. We were all kind of clawing over the detail of it, honestly, and like taking pictures and trying to read, everything that was there.
It was proper geeking out, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really, really fascinating. So, I mean, obviously then I guess your first process was to come up with names of characters and things like this. That was the kind of starting point, I believe.
The assignment, let me just roll it back a little bit. So Jim Shooter wrote, Hasbro came to Marvel. This is before I get involved at all. Hasbro came to Marvel and basically said to Jim Shooter, or through channels to Jim Shooter, we want you to do what you did a couple years ago for G.I. Joe, which was another Hasbro property, which is develop it into a comic book, create the characters, create the backstory. Jim Shooter wrote the backstory as part of his day job. From whatever, he didn't get $1 for it. That's the basis of everything that came after that. And then he asked a more senior editor with lots of writing experience to develop the characters. And for reasons that I'm not aware of, because it wasn't really my business, he didn't care for what the writer turned in. And then rather than go back to that writer and ask that writer editor and ask, can you revise this in such and such a way? He just looked for another writer. And he looked for another editor who could write. So he went through probably about 3 other editor writers before he got to me. The other guys all turned him down. And finally he settled on me, and I'm the first one who said yes. And I didn't have a lot of writing experience at that point. I was known more as an artist editor. But anyway, he settled on me because he was desperate. And I mean, after being turned down 3 or 4 times, you'd like, everybody go lift a pen, you'll take. So anyway, he gave me the assignment, and basically I got the assignment on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and I had to turn it in on Monday. And basically the assignment was the first flight of Transformers toys consist of 26 characters. Yeah. We're keeping 2 names from the previous writer, which was Optimus Prime and Prowl. We need you to come up with 24 more names and write 26 character descriptions and have it for me by Monday morning.
Incredible.
No pressure.
I had a quiet weekend, and I didn't have much of a life back then, I suppose. And so, I went home and I came up with all the rest of the names, and a couple of them got tweaked because for one reason or another. But basically, over that weekend, I turned in what he asked me to turn in. He liked it, passed it on to Hasbro. They liked it. And then after that, I was the Transformers go-to guy at Marvel. Anything that came up in the future about Transformers, Hasbro came to me to develop the new characters that followed the characters I initially created, and so on and so forth. Once I had turned in that initial batch of characters and they were met with general approval, eventually Marvel launched the 4-issue miniseries, and Jim Shooter thought I'd be the right person to be the editor of that. So I was the editor of that. And then, like I said earlier, that portion of my career turned into the special projects editor job. And then once Transformers became a regular monthly series with issue 5, because of the success of the miniseries, it was no longer considered a special project. It was now a mainstream Marvel comic book, monthly comic book. So it was taken away from me as the editor. And then the new editor came to me and asked me, for advice, because he didn't know anything about Transformers. He said, Bob, if you were the editor of the Transformers, starting as a monthly comic book with issue 5, what would you do? And I said, I would fire the writer that I have now and hire me. And that wasn't because I didn't like the writer. Actually, he was my former boss, my former editor. When I was assistant editor, my boss was editor Jim Salicrup. And indeed, he was Jim Salicrup, who I got fired. But and we're still friends, by the way.
Good. I'm glad. I was gonna ask.
But the reason I said that was because in the 4-issue miniseries, I had 3 different writers. And I don't have to tell you and your audience that when you plan a miniseries, you don't plan to have multiple writers writing each story. Yeah. So I was basically, none of the writers felt comfortable writing the Transformers. They thought it was beyond them to comprehend and how to get their hands around this concept with all these characters and make some stories out of it. So I was basically dictating the plots to them. Right. I felt like, well, if this new editor wants to continue with the whether he wants to or not wasn't really a question, but he's assigned to continue the Transformers book. Yeah, he's going to be working with somebody who doesn't understand the property. Not well enough to come up with plots on his own. So why not hire the guy who's been doing the plots, which is me?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you feel like you'd taken a little bit of ownership of it by that point then?
Well, yeah. I mean, exactly. I was creating the characters, and I felt I had some knowledge of what this whole thing was about, and I had guided the 4-issue miniseries for better or for worse, anyway. So I felt like I felt comfortable continuing it as a writer and not just abandoning it. So anyway, that editor agreed, and I became the writer on it. Then I stayed on it from issue 5 through issue 55. with a couple of fill-in issues in between.
Yeah, of course. And it's interesting because once you obviously come on for issue 5, the whole sort of pace and tone of the comic shifts quite a bit as well. It's quite noticeable. So I guess at that point, you've sort of done all the heavy lifting in terms of the exposition and sort of setting a lot of the characters and things like this, because it does feel like it becomes much more of a sort of epic saga, as it were, from that point on, with characters like Shockwave and things like this coming in. Would you say that's fair? The sort of training wheels were off a little bit, I guess, at that point?
Well, I think the big difference was it didn't have to end with issue 4. So the first 4 issues, I knew that whatever the writers and me, whatever we did together to create this 4-issue miniseries, it had to resolve itself. And so we had to bring it all together and tie up all whatever loose ends, or tried our best to. I don't know if we did. But once it launched as a regular monthly comic book, I didn't have to focus on resolving anything. I
of course.
Focus on individual stories, developing individual characters. And, like you said, I brought in Shockwave, made a big deal out of him, and it was able to, have a lot more flexibility about the kind of stories I could do. So, if you followed the pattern of the stories I wrote, there wasn't much of a pattern, like they were all over the place.
Right.
Or anyway, I tried to give Transformers a lot of bandwidth. They could be here, they could be there, they could be under the ocean, they could be in outer space, they could be on Cybertron, they could be on a space station. They could, I really tried to expand what the Transformers was all about beyond whatever we were limited to in the miniseries. And by the way, you folks in Great Britain actually got to see the actual ending that was supposed to be.
We did, yeah.
We did, yeah. It was true.
Yeah.
We didn't know it was going to go on to issue 5, so we as the editor, I planned along with the writer and the artist to have it all resolved at the end of issue 4. And if you remember your version of it, at the end, Optimus Prime, he's smiling behind that mask plate that he's wearing. Says, well, we good as won over evil or something like that. To the earth. Everybody lives happily ever after. But in the American version, at the last moment, I commissioned a page or two to replace the last couple of pages of the original ending, so that it ended on a cliffhanger with Shockwave showing up and blasting all the Autobots.
It's considered now to be one of for the people that really love that comic, which is a lot of people, it's considered to be one of the sort of like real shocking moments of that comic, actually, the Shockwave moment, because it was such a sort of U-turn almost of like, it feels like, as you said, everything is wrapping up, which of course it was, initially designed to be. And then suddenly this new evil appears, So for a lot of kids at that time, it was like, what? It really sort of made quite the impact.
Totally. It was a shock to me too, because I wasn't planning on continuing the book. But it worked out. And then all credit to the new editor, Jim Owsley, at that time, because he commissioned a wonderful cover, a classic cover from issue 5. Shockwave is standing in front of a wall and he's burned into the wall. Autobots are all dead or something like that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Stunning.
It's still probably the best cover I can think of from the Marvel run back then.
Yeah. It's certainly
totally
up there.
Iconic. It's so famous. It's brilliant.
It's become such a sort of indelible image that in this fandom and everything.
Yeah.
So, from that point on then, what was how much involvement was there from Hasbro by this point? Were they, I gather they were quite hands-off, or I've heard that said.
Yes and no. Okay, so all plots had to be run by Hasbro for their approval.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that went generally, with a couple of minor exceptions, they never had a problem with whatever stories I was coming up with. They had a problem with the cover I sketched out, but we made adjustments to it. But other than that, I don't think they ever really said, oh, don't do this or don't do that with the plot. Right. What they were concerned about, and I was always aware of this, was because Transformers was so phenomenally successful those first several years of the brand, they would introduce a couple of times a year a whole new product line.
Yeah.
So I'd be asked to develop another dozen or 24 characters, which I would. I'd come up with more names, more personality profiles. I'd submit them to Hasbro. but then they expected those characters to appear at least for one panel, if not more, in the comic book. So I had to find all different ways to introduce new characters into this very self-enclosed bubble that Jim Shooter originally created. Because if you recall, the original origin was all the Transformers show up on Earth, the Autobots and the Decepticons, they're all trapped in this spaceship that crash lands on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. Okay, then 6 months later, here's another, 15, 20 characters. They were they taking a nap on the station when everybody else woke up? Then they were
totally
indisposed somehow. So no, I had to come up with different ways to introduce more characters.
Yeah.
So with a creative challenge, and I think in a lot of ways it was good because it helped expand the mythology of the Transformers quite a bit, which was a good thing. But after a while, it became tiresome because I found as a writer, I'd be spending a few months developing a couple of characters this way or that way. And then I had to kind of shove them aside to make room for all these new characters.
Yeah.
So hopefully, from the reader's point of view, it was like, oh, it's exciting to meet all these new characters. And hopefully I was able to do it with such finesse, with such skill that the readers didn't notice that I was just shoving aside the old characters that Hasbro was no longer producing as toys and putting in the new toys as characters.
I think probably the only time it is maybe slightly more noticeable is with the big Starscream epic for issue 50.
I wiped everybody out.
Run. Yeah, it's just wiping out whole
that was more just because it was issue 50. I wanted to have a big deal. But,
okay.
That was part of it. Part of it was just to help clear the decks.
So Bob, thinking of you as a creative, then was this process that you're going through, getting a toy brand, and you said it earlier, Marvel and what it was doing was this was to sell toys. Let's not kind of mess around. That we know that was the case for the comic and stuff like that. But as a creative, did you find it fun? Did you find it frustrating? A combination of all of that kind of stuff? The elements that, the fact you had to move on and do something different, and did you ever find that you kind of were frustrated that you couldn't take the story in a direction potentially?
Well, I mean, I basically, that's what I was saying a couple minutes ago. Like, it was frustrating to have to push aside some characters and storylines that maybe I was wanting to develop further and make room for all these new characters. On the other hand, what was great about writing Transformers was because it was so disconnected from the Marvel Universe, and we did connect it in a couple of little ways here and there, but generally it pretty much existed on its own. I was able to do anything I wanted.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't limited by, well, if they're fighting in New York City, then what about the Avengers showing up or Spider-Man?
Yeah, of course. Totally.
It's like they just do their own thing, and I don't have to worry about 30 years of Marvel continuity and how to connect it all. So
I guess you could create your own like alien races and things like this as well, little kind of nuances of Transformers lore, things like that, and just introduce them as well. So.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really nice. Yeah, it's just really interesting from that creative point of view, because obviously you're working for a big known brand, and it's like there's always a challenge there about actually just being able to be creative and do that at the same time. Was there any crossovers that happened within that era that you were overseeing?
There were guest stars. I wouldn't say there were any crossovers.
Yeah,
we guest starred Spider-Man in the third issue, and again, that's of course Jim Salicrup, who at the time was not only the writer of the third issue, but he was the Spider-Man editor. So it was easy to get his permission to put Spider-Man in the book.
Yeah,
it was his idea.
And Venom, I think, technically.
But we didn't know it was Venom back then.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Technically, but yeah.
That's good.
We didn't know what he was going to become. But a little interesting side note is that's one of the things that you asked me earlier about Hasbro. Were they okay with everything? That's one of the things they rejected. So when we came up with, when I approached Hasbro and said, hey, we're going to give you Marvel's #1 headline character, Spider-Man, as a guest star in your anonymous toy book that nobody's ever heard of. And, we were expecting, oh, thank you so much. That's so kind of you. No, they rejected Spider-Man.
Wow.
There's a reason they rejected Spider-Man, and it just shows you always have to, when you're in these kind of situations, when you're working with other partners, you have to look at it from their point of view sometimes. You can't just look at it from your own point of view. From their point of view, from our point of view, we were using Spider-Man to help sell comic books. He's a big name. Tremendous character recognition. Maybe some kids will buy the book just because Spider-Man's on the cover. from their point of view, at that time, a different competing toy company had the license for Marvel action figures.
Of course.
And Spider-Man was one of them.
Yeah.
So they just looked at it as, well, our competitor might benefit from that if we feature Spider-Man in our Transformers book. They'll sell more action figures. Now, I have to say, I don't think anybody's going to care from Hasbro anymore from 40 years ago. What a ridiculous way to look at things. But you really think that if one kid picks up that comic book with Spider-Man, they buy one action figure, it's going to affect your bottom line at Hasbro?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
how
corporate.
ridiculous can you be? So what happened, though, was Jim Salicrup, again, he's Spider-Man editor. He was very knowledgeable what was going on in Spider-Man, obviously. He suggested, well, we just introduced Spider-Man in a black and white costume in Secret Wars. So why don't we feature him in that costume? Because the license that the other toy company has features Spider-Man in the red and blue costume.
Right.
As an action figure. So when I presented it to Hasbro that way, they agreed to it.
How funny,
amazing.
Honestly.
That's
It's quite crazy that that's happening at the same time, because Secret Wars was also like a big licensed sort of thing, wasn't it? Like it was Marvel's own comic, but they spawned it into toy lines and then sticker books and all sorts of
I'm sure
merchandising.
Secret Wars tied into that toy line I was just talking about. I don't know all the details about that toy line and the timing of it, but it wouldn't surprise me.
It was the Secret Wars toy line, wasn't it? It was
a big push behind that toy line was to put out that comic book. Yeah, so that worked out. So anyway, back to the crossover. So we referred to this the Savage Land, which was a Marvel concept.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to introduce the Dinobots, and the only place in the Marvel universe that I knew where dinosaurs existed in the present day was the Savage Land. So I kind of cross-pollinated those two ideas. And then later on, I created not that much later on, actually, right around that time, I created a character called Circuit Breaker.
Well, we had in mind to ask you.
I thought she had potential as a character I might want to use somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
In a different book as a villain or anti-hero, whatever she was. If I put her into Transformers as a first appearance, then she would automatically become the property of Hasbro.
Of Hasbro,
So featured her for one panel in Secret Wars.
Yeah.
So that, or maybe Secret Wars 2, I forget. But she first appeared in a Marvel comic book, so Marvel kept the copyright.
Yeah.
Which would have given me the freedom to use her somewhere else, which I never did. So, so I understand, as a result of those connections to the Marvel universe, anytime all these companies that have licensed Transformers for comic books beyond Marvel, like IDW and now Image and Dreamwave, was that?
Dreamwave.
Anytime they wanted to reprint those comics, they had difficulties because they didn't have those characters.
Of course.
Those concepts. So I don't know if they were able to do it or not, but I'm sure it created all sorts. I've heard stories like, oh yeah, when they reprinted the Marvel comics, they had to skip a bunch of those issues because of those characters.
Yeah. I think it has
so I created a lot of problems that I could not foresee back then.
It's funny to think that 20 years later we got the new Avengers and Transformers crossover, didn't we? And it's like a big fanfare behind that. All these years later, I'm
hearing about it. There's an Avengers Transformers crossover.
Oh yeah, from sort of the mid 2000s.
They've crossed over with Ghostbusters now and all kinds of stuff. So
the new Avengers one was sort of the mid 2000s, wasn't it?
Really?
It was.
Yeah.
So that was like an IDW. Marvel
crossover.
So
it was.
Yeah, you've got Wolverine in there, Captain America, Optimus Prime, all of those, and it's just quite funny to think that by that point, I imagine Hasbro were like, "Yes, please put those characters."
Yeah, it's really funny now because the whole idea of crossovers is seen as a kind of benefit, and it's seen as a good thing when they do that, but kind of very different times, kind of 30 odd years ago.
But the difference, I think, now, Bob, is that we had a chat very recently with Daniel Warren Johnson, who I don't know if you've heard of, but he works on the current Transformers book, which is published by Skybound from Image Comics, and he's the writer and was the artist on that book as well. And they've just won some awards and whatever else. But that was a really interesting chat because this guy is like a current legend of the comics biz, and he's done a lot of his own creator-owned books and things like this. And he said that it was he was telling us how it's kind of mad because one thing he wasn't prepared for working on a Transformers book was being told he'd drawn a picture of, the Autobot spaceship, the Ark as it's sometimes called. And he was saying that he'd just drawn it kind of how he wanted to. And now Hasbro were telling him to correct the number of thrusters that it had on the back and things like this.
Oh.
And he was very like, oh, what? Do you know what I mean? But I guess the mad thing is that, at the time, you were sort of creating this stuff kind of out of thin air, whereas now, artists and things are getting sort of corrected to the things that you and the artists at the time put in place. It's become the sort of established standard, if you like. And
foundational text, isn't it, basically?
Well, exactly. I can tell you that it was all completely unintentional on my part. I wasn't trying to dictate what was going to happen 30, 40 years later. It's like the last thing on my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, coming back to the era, I guess I was interested to ask about, we talked briefly about some of the character choices and you wanting to focus on specific characters. Was that something that kind of ever came from Hasbro, or was that you looking at, because I know you focused on like Blaster was a big one, characters like this. Was that you just looking at the toys and thinking, this one's kind of interesting and drawing some inspiration from that?
Mostly it was just like I was just picking out characters that I thought would work well in this particular story I had in my mind, and knowing that I was, I had to introduce the Triple Changers, I had to introduce the Pretenders, I had to introduce the Dinobots or whatever. I think there were probably a couple of times where Hasbro said, we really want you to feature the Dinobots. We really want you to feature, Destructor? When the Simpson Wall
Devastator. Yeah.
Devastator. Just Devastator. I should know that I named it. So they might have mentioned a few of those that they really wanted me to highlight, and then there were others that I know literally showed up for like a panel or two, and I did lip service.
Yeah, you did what you could.
And I moved on. But I did have a lot of freedom as long as I told the line, meaning like I got those characters in there, those new characters, and at least gave them a little bit of screen time in the comic books before
a nod. Yeah, for sure. Well, it was good because it did. I mean, I know it was for selling toys and everything, but it did also create this feeling of a large world. It certainly expanded the kind of feeling of the size of the storyline and things like that. So that was certainly something. Did Hasbro ever mandate that certain characters had to be killed off as well, or was that just literally?
No, I think there were times when I wanted to move aside. I won't say kill, move aside certain characters.
Yeah,
and I was either aware or I asked, are these guys going to be toys next toy season?
Yeah,
and if they weren't going to be toys, Hasbro really didn't care about them.
Right.
They had their moment on the shelves, and then now they're selling other toys. So who cares? I also took the attitude that they're robotic life forms, so no matter what happens to them, they could be rebuilt.
Yeah,
I did do that on occasion where somebody got destroyed, and Optimus Prime being a great example. And
I was just going to say,
I grew up in the 60s reading comic books. Most of the comics I read initially were DC comics. And they were the comic book called Metal Men. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Metal Men.
Yeah.
Yep.
Metal Men were these synthetic, lifelike robots that were built by Doc Magnus, Professor Magnus. I forget if it was a doctor or professor, but this brilliant scientist who created these robotic humanoid life forms. In every issue, they got destroyed. In the following issue, would begin with a scene with him repairing them.
How funny.
Right, yeah.
And so I figured, well, if the Metal Men could be repaired and, brought back to life the following issue, why not the Transformers, So
yeah, for sure.
Nobody was ever, in my mind, nobody was ever really dead. They could all have a chance to be rebuilt.
So, I mean, you mentioned Optimus Prime, obviously, and that one was kind of at the forefront of my mind. Was that your call then to
Yes.
I know you said don't say kill, but, to kind of remove him from
the table. And I even, and to any reader who was paying half attention, I even showed how he was going to come back to life at the end.
Yeah. Totally.
To make it clear, like he's not really dead. But I wanted to, I wasn't, maybe I beat the movie, before, but he was killed in the movie too.
Of course.
Totally.
I might have gotten there before the movie did. But, it's not that original idea. Let's kill off a main character and create a big stir. So I just wanted to do it for a couple of reasons. I wanted to, make a dramatic storyline. And plus, again, I was being pushed, left and right to introduce all these new characters. And Optimus Prime just kind of loomed over everything. It's like, he's in charge. Well, what if he's not in charge? Then what happens? So that gave me the opportunity to play with some other characters and have them take leadership roles that otherwise Optimus Prime would have had.
Yeah. Oh, was it just coincidence then? Because, of course, when he comes back, it's with a new toy. which was the first time any.
I don't know if
character
that. I don't
had a
even
new
know
toy.
if that was like my plan when he was taken off the
Right.
taken out of the roster of active Transformers. But I guess I saw that. I guess at some point Hasbro said we're going to make him a headmaster or
A Power Master.
Yeah,
Power Master.
Yeah.
I think he originally there was plans to make him a headmaster as
Yeah.
well. So I don't know if that's
Well,
memory coming in there.
that gave
or-
me a good opportunity to achieve two things: bring him back as a new
Sure.
toy that Hasbro was
Yeah.
going to be introducing to the market.
It worked out. Yeah.
And then when you mentioned earlier as well about Circuit Breaker, and then bringing in like a humanoid character. Like what was the thinking behind that? Bringing in like it was it was such a kind of formative character for me as well. It was this female character that came in and started destroying any Transformer. And it was I have distinct memories of reading that part of the comic as well. Was that because you wanted to do humanoid characters? Was it purely for plot? Was it something else?
Well, I came at the Transformers from a particular with a particular direction in mind, which was these are giant robotic life forms of immense power, and they're on Earth.
Mhm.
And I always wanted to, at least the stories that I placed on Earth, which were most of them, I always wanted to have that interface in there in one way or another, and the friction it would cause.
Mm.
Because some of these Transformers are protective of us because we're weak compared to them, and some of them just look at us as something to be exploited, to steal our energy resources or whatever. And so I wanted to always play with that concept in any story that took place on Earth, and I think I generally achieved that in most, if not all, the stories that I wrote that took place on Earth. So with Circuit Breaker, and she wasn't the only one. I wanted to create, they're on Earth. I don't want the humans just to be like these weak characters that you could kind of like sidetrack anytime. A good name for a Transformer, sidetrack.
I think it's
Write
been
that
done,
down.
actually.
I bet they're copywriting that right now.
I think it's been done, that one. I hate to tell you.
It has been done?
Yeah, I think so.
Gee, okay.
Yeah.
Everything's okay. So anyway, but you could easily, like I've watched a couple of Transformers movies, and the impression I walk away with is not so much Bumblebee, but like the other guys, the other movies. Like the humans are like innocuous. They show up, they shoot a lot of bullets at him, or and the Transformers like shrug them off, like who cares? Okay, so I wanted to put a couple of characters in there that could actually make a difference. A couple of human characters, and Circuit Breaker being probably the premier example of that. Like she was a real danger to the Transformers. She wasn't just somebody that they could ignore. She had certain skills and certain powers that really presented a problem for them. So that was in my thinking. Like they're on Earth, they're interacting with humans. The humans should be more than just secondary, characters
Right,
that they could
exactly.
ignore.
Yeah, totally.
Have some.
They've got a bit of agency.
Some agency in this, right?
Yeah. That makes total sense.
Great. I just the whole, even her character and how she came to be. It's like, this is in the UK. As I said earlier, the comics were a different kind of thing. So me reading this when I was a kid and understanding the kind of trauma that she went through and what she became was fascinating. It was like a real eye opener for me from that kind of comics. And then I started reading kind of American comics as well. But it was something that I hadn't really experienced before as well. And was that kind of intent that you wanted to do kind of that? Because she was an interesting character because she had a darker side to her, didn't she?
It was quite edgy. Yeah.
Edgy.
Yeah.
Well, as I recall, I was, I wanted to give whoever this character was going to become a motivation of why she would hate the Transformers.
Totally.
And so she had this tragic beginning where she had this terrible accident that was a result of something the Transformers were, some battle between them. I forget the details, but she was collateral damage. But she had enough of in the comic book world, anytime you have a scientist, you're just waiting for this, for the next to drop. Like a scientist becomes Iron Man, scientist becomes Batman.
True. That's true.
They don't just sit around and play with their slide rules or whatever.
No, for sure.
They actually go ahead and become some super creature of one sort or another.
Or have a tragic accident of some kind. Become the Hulk and
exactly,
whatever.
So you're just waiting for that to happen. So that's what I did with Josie Beller, I think her name was.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I wanted to give her a tragic background so she'd have a motivation of why she felt the Transformers were her foes, why they had to be destroyed. And, that was what was behind it.
It worked well.
Very well, yeah.
I also did want to ask you just quickly about some of the future characters, because it's very noticeable that for your run on the comic, you pretty much avoided, for the most part, the future set stories. By that, I mean the characters that originated in the 86 movie, so like Hot Rod, Rodimus Prime, all the Cup, all of those guys. Was that for you? Was that like a conscious thing? Was that a Hasbro thing? What was the deal there? Or was it just that you were kind of already working on the kind of present day 80s storyline at the time?
Well, I think there were two things that went into that. Number one was, I think with the second season of the animated cartoon, that's redundant, the animated TV show, Transform, and I never watched a single episode of it. So I'm
Is that right?
Oh, really?
I'm pretty ignorant about it. But my impression was that in the second season, they moved off of Earth into outer space.
Yeah.
And I asked Hasbro at the time, I said, do I have to follow the lead of the animated show? And he said, no, you can do what you want. So, okay.
Right.
I was interested in keeping them on Earth. And like I said earlier, what I liked about writing Transformers stories on Earth was I could show that friction between the Transformers race and the human race. And find
exactly
different ways to like make those into hopefully interesting stories. And, so if I had followed the lead of the movie, which also took place not on Earth, or mostly not on Earth, outer space, and it moved into the future as well, I would have had to leave a lot of that behind. And the other thing was, okay, yeah, the movie characters, and maybe I missed a bet there because the movie characters were, had a wide audience, they were popular. Maybe I should have used them, but there were so many other characters in the meantime that Hasbro kept pushing down on me to use. Why go out of my way to bring in the movie characters when I have to bring in, these characters or those characters, So it wasn't like I felt a lack of characters to
you didn't struggle. Yeah, it's fair to say for characters to use. I guess I'm just surprised that Hasbro didn't at any point say, "Well, we want these characters included, even if it's in the kind of present day, as it were." So,
they didn't bring that up. No. They let me be.
Yeah. It was interesting because that actually, if anything, brings me to my next sort of point of discussion, which is the UK book, which was obviously running concurrently with your own, because they did use the future cast a lot. And I think in many ways, you not doing that enabled, Simon and what was going on the UK side to really flesh that out and just go full hog with that. When did you first become aware of the Marvel UK side of things?
So I always like to make jokes about this at panels when I'm there with Simon, that question comes up. So what did you think about the Marvel UK books? And like I said, there were Marvel UK books?
Yeah.
Or I wasn't even aware there was in England back then. Americans,
I'm sure he loves it.
I think I was trying to trying to support the idea that Americans really don't give a blank about the rest of the world. We don't care what's happening over the other side of the Atlantic Ocean.
Totally.
It could be a flat Earth and there's a cliff there. We don't know.
Well, we know now that you designed the mask of Captain Britain, so we know the truth.
Spoiler.
We know the truth.
Right. So I am somewhat aware of England, but anyway, I really didn't know other than knowing that there were fill-in issues because the English market, the British market couldn't keep up their publishing schedule if they just relied on the books that we were putting out in America.
Yeah.
They would exceed that total very quickly. So they had to put in fill-in issues. And then Simon Furman came over to visit the American office at some point, the Marvel offices. And so I met him but I didn't keep up. I wasn't reading the stories. We didn't even get the stories that they were putting out. Maybe we did, but I wasn't the editor back then. So it was the Marvel editor, Don Daly for most of that time, who would have been liaisoning with the Marvel UK office as far as whatever they were doing or whatever reference materials they needed from the Marvel operation in order for them to do their books. So I have heard Simon talk about it on a few occasions that he had to find, as a writer, he had to find those areas, those cracks in my storyline where he could bring in some characters I had I had put on the shelf somewhere, where I wasn't actively using, and write stories about them, or in this case, what you're talking about, bring in the movie characters or whatever to fill in those gaps so that they can continue publishing a weekly Transformers comic book. But I really wasn't involved in any of that, so I'm really a person to ask much about it.
Well, yeah, and I think we said to you just before we started that hopefully we're having Simon on soon, and he's actually just started doing his own podcast very recently.
Competition.
Where he's talking a lot about this stuff. Yeah, him and Andy Wildman, one of the Marvel UK artists from back in the day, they're talking together about the kind of creation of and the early days of the Marvel UK Transformers book. So that's worth a listen. But yeah, I believe from Simon's perspective, he's talked a bit about the fact that Jim Shooter, I think, made a visit to the Marvel UK offices, and I wasn't sure if it all kind of came out of that from your memory, but
I wasn't part of that, so I wouldn't have a memory. My only memory of Marvel UK, it's not even the London office. Apparently, I visited it. I don't remember. I really don't remember, but Simon says I definitely did. But I met Simon. I met Simon in February of '89 in London. A friend of mine and myself, we took a vacation in England. So we were traveling around, and at the end of our trip, we stayed a couple days in London, and we met Simon for lunch, and he claims, and I don't doubt him for a moment, I just don't remember. He claims I came up to the Marvel office in London, and so that was it. But beyond that, I didn't read anything. I didn't have any connection to what they did over there. And what came out of that lunch, is that I was really, for many months already, I really wanted to move off of Transformers and onto other things. And so I asked Simon if he wanted to take over writing it from me. So, and he said immediately yes. And so I left with issue 55, and he took over with issue 56.
Yeah. Amazing.
What was the handover of that like? Was it just that you because obviously the last issue that you wrote was the wrestling,
right?
With the Micromasters and everything, which is a really different comic in itself. Was that you just kind of putting a full stop to the whole thing?
I guess. I mean, I guess one thing that issue might reveal to the more observant reader is I was really running out of ideas. So, even with an issue about wrestling, and so I don't even remember how I wrapped it up, if I wrapped it up at all, but, it wasn't really for me to connect the dots, from my tenure to Simon's tenure. It was really up to the editor. So if the editor said to me, "Oh, you have to leave, these kind of loose ends for Simon to pick up," I don't know. I don't remember what he said, if he said anything. But it wasn't, once it was Simon's book, I was out of the picture.
Of course.
With all that time, that's this time that you've had on the book, and, a 55 issue run, and it's a substantial part of your career, obviously, as well. Is there anything looking back, you would have done differently? Or it's just kind of like that bit done there and then?
When I look back, I don't revisit things I've already written. It's like, done. It's time to move forward and not look back.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that occurs to me that I would have done differently, and as a reader, you probably wouldn't even notice it. So the very first story I wrote for the new editor, Jim Owsley, was issue 5. I turned in a plot. The way Marvel worked back then, you turned in a plot, the editor approved it. In this case, the editor and Hasbro had to approve it. And then it went to the artist drew it, and then it went back to the writer, and the writer scripted it, wrote the dialogue. So I turned in a plot, and when I got the pencil artwork back from the artist, it was only half the plot.
Oh, wow.
And what Jim Owsley had done, he decided that I had put too much plot in my first plot. Again, I was not an experienced writer.
Right.
I plotted some comics with other writers. I hadn't really written anything up until then on my own. So I packed in too much story, in his opinion. I don't disagree with his opinion, by the way. So if I knew back then what I know now, I would have certainly paced the story differently and broken it up into 2 issues. But what he did was he just chopped it in half, without telling me
Right.
to the
Yeah.
audience. And so I was shocked, like, it ends there. Like, I could have come, if you just talked to me about it, I might have tweaked the ending a little bit so it had a better ending for a two-part story like that. Maybe I would have left it the same. I don't even know. But that's what. So that it taught me a valuable lesson, which was try not to put too much story into a 20-page.
Yeah, but that's experience, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. And just
but
learning.
other than that, I don't know. I mean, you know, I'm sure if I reread some of those stories, I'd find things in them that I would have done a little differently. But I actually, on occasion, I have reread stories recently, parts of stories, and I read them and I said, that's a pretty good read. I was pretty good.
I revisit them a lot. You know, we do an entire other episodes on it. So they're good to reread, honestly.
Well, I'd be remiss if I know I told you this before we hit record, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that a lot of our subscribers on Patreon, they have a little group where they are rereading the comic, the book club issue by issue on a weekly basis. And one of our patrons, who's called Dog Lunch UK, is his screen name, and he's taking them through every week, and they discuss it and whatever else, and it's garnering a lot of focus even today, you know, sort of 35, 40 years on, whatever you want to
it's a really lovely chat. It's great.
The busiest part of the Discord, isn't it?
It is.
There is a lot. The minutiae of detail of going through each issue, Bob, and then when people are looking at it as well, there's a lot of love for it, definitely.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
When did you become aware of that level of? I think I've read bits with you before talking about, you know, in the 90s, sort of first becoming aware of the idea of Transformers fandom. Was that a bit of a surprise at the time, or?
Yeah,
and is it a surprise now that it's still going?
Well, now, I mean, I'm kind of used to it because it's been going on for so long, but late 1990s, you know, when the internet was starting to pick up and there would be these groups of people with a common interest and they would post things about it. However it occurred, I don't know, but I came across like a Transformers group. I forget what it was called, but there was a website for people to comment on Transformers comics that I had written. And what shocked me was, well, first of all, there was a lot of negativity about some of my stories. But I think back then, even more so than now, some of the internet was known for like being, attracting a lot of negativity. You know, people coming out and venting on the internet. So there was a lot of negativity, and there was a lot of speculation about who I was. So people thought I was a recluse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like people would talk about like, you know, like where's Bob? You know, like, well, just because I was no longer active with the Transformers. Didn't mean my life came to an end. You know, I was doing other things. So I was not involved in the Transformers community because I hadn't been involved with the Transformers since 1989.
I remember reading something about this, but like years ago, you know, and it was a thing, almost like a kind of Bill Watterson type, you know, where you kind of, you know, cut yourself off from any kind of publicity or what have you, you know.
Well, I had no reason to be further involved with the Transformers.
Yeah,
because clearly there were people who grew up with the Transformers who loved talking about the Transformers and revisiting it, and I was, you know, really surprised that there was this community out there talking about comic books I had written at that time. It was about, you know, 15 years earlier. And they were so opinionated about it. And frankly, my reaction to, you know, a lot of the comments were, like I said, pretty negative. My reaction was, I was writing these stories for like 8 and 10-year-olds. You know, you're adults.
Exactly. Yeah. That's
very fair.
You know, I mean, I don't think I was writing I was trying not to write down to them, but I was keeping in mind that my core audience were not adults. And
absolutely.
And so I was, you know, kind of surprised. But anyway, once people started getting in touch with me for interviews like this, like we're having now, although not to demean you guys, but like you're not the first interview I've done.
Oh no, of course.
No, we are. We're
under no illusion. Liam might be, but
yeah, I'm shocked.
Yeah, I know. Like, well, I hate to break it to you. You don't have the exclusive on me.
No.
End the interview.
So in any case, what I found out was once I started doing the interviews, all this love came out. Oh, Bob. He started calling me.
Nice.
I shouldn't say this because now people start calling it to me again. Uncle Bob on
I've heard that as well.
Like I was their old favorite uncle or something. So like just because I popped up from under a rock somewhere and started talking, all of a sudden I was popular. You know,
Yeah,
but meanwhile,
totally.
like I had no reason to be involved with Transformers. I didn't even realize until I started seeing these websites talking about Transformers. There's such a thing.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to
Brilliant.
talk to people about Transformers. I loved working on it. I have nothing to be ashamed of. And so over the years, I've done podcasts like you're doing, and I've done conventions and panels, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive. And I think a lot of my stories have had a resurgence of like there's a revisionist, like, oh, those stories we didn't like back in 1999, and we love them now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something a lot of love.
We always like them, Bob.
Yeah,
we always
that's right.
like them.
So just to follow on from what you were just saying there about, kind of finding the love within the fandom, which, to be honest, Bob, is my experience with the fandom as well, and conventions and stuff like that. You were one of the first inductees to the Hasbro Hall of Fame as well, one of 4. What did that mean to you? Did it mean anything? Was it kind of weird? Was it wonderful? Is it like something that you're just kind of like, oh, cool?
No, it was really great. So Hasbro had a convention down in Orlando, Florida, on the Disney property, and they invited me down. They had this big banquet dinner for any fans who wanted to attend. I guess they paid something, a little price to come in and get a dinner, and they had all these tables set up. And they had a stage, and they had a multimedia presentation for each one of the inductees, including me.
Wow.
And I felt very honored that they felt I should be in the inaugural class for the Transformers Hall of Fame, which I thought that was like I've said this many times to people at different panels and so on. When I was writing the Transformers comic book, all I was thinking about as I wrote an issue was finishing that issue and moving on to the next issue. Because because everything was, okay, that issue's done. It'll go out there. People will buy it. They'll read it, and we'll all move on. And here we are 50 years later. We're still talking about it. So I didn't know we'd have any lasting effect on, fandom. Anybody would care. Once that comic book disappeared and another one came out the following month.
For sure.
It was a very, very, ephemeral sort of a experience for me, ephemeral, that's the right word, or temporary. Just like the idea was that I wrote it, it's done, it's behind me. All right.
Yeah.
So then, 2010, 26 years after I started on Transformers, I'm inducted into the Transformers Hall of Fame because clearly people still care about the work I did from, way back when. And I never expected or planned for anything like that to happen. So, I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, you should be.
You definitely should be.
And the thing is, we talk about this a lot on the pod and stuff, but, the impact that Transformers, but also the characters that you created, that they've had on our lives, but then generations of lives as well. And the core for me, which came from what you wrote, was it was always a very joyful. It was always a good kind of action comic that I really enjoyed as well. And there's a lot of that love for it. I think more than anything else is what a lot of people in the fandom see. It's great. It's really lovely.
Yeah, I mean, it's inspired so many people, and there will always be people, I suppose, that grumble about stuff or whatever. But generally speaking, I think the amount that it's contributed. I mean, is it weird now seeing, obviously, with like big screen films and things like this? They've got the new Transformers 1 that's coming out in America, in like next week, I think it is. Is that weird to see? Because, of course, still so much of that, we've seen it, by the way, but so much of that story is rooted in what you wrote.
It's not weird anymore. I'm kind of used to the fact that there are these big budget movies coming out every couple
of course.
years. Yeah. But I remember when first hearing, whenever it was, like 2004, 2005, movie studio is going to put out a live action Transformers movie. Steven Spielberg is executive producer.
Yeah, right.
Where did that come from?
Hey, remember me?
Wow, like that was quite a shock. But I think now it's just like everything else. Like who thought Marvel Comics would be the biggest movie enterprise?
Well, exactly.
Well, exactly. This is that's a whole other podcast chat with you. I think that that's
now you accept that as that's just like I remember. I'm going a little off topic here, but early 1990s, DC Comics put out the Death of Superman storyline, which was enormously successful. And one of the outcomes of that was that that storyline was talked about on a mainstream TV network morning talk show called the Today Show. They talked about a comic book in the early 1990s. And that was unheard of.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, a few months later, the Marvel, I wouldn't call them the brains, but, like the president of the company, the head of public relations, the senior editors, including myself, editor-in-chief, we all went to a meeting. We all got a meeting together because we had to come up with something that would get us on morning talk show television, just like DC did. Nowadays, it's second nature that this stuff shows up all the time on mainstream TV shows. Like it's common. It's as common as I don't know. Watching a weather report, like,
it really is.
Marvel movie. They're talking about
totally changed.
It's like everything's changed.
They're huge properties now.
Yeah. So Transformers are like that too. It's like you expect it.
Yeah, I think that's come off the back of the fact that, growing up with the likes of these what have become massive franchises like Transformers, like Star Wars, the superheroes, all these different characters that then the generations of kids that have grown up with that are now working in it, and they're part of it. And it's all kind of this cycle of just
they're working in
it.
And I mean, bottom line is somebody's making a lot of money off of it.
Oh, of course.
Well, absolutely.
If there's money to be made, and that means people's, it's attracting people's eyeballs, there's an audience for it. So that's, it's all part of the big money, the big media money machine. And I understand that. I'm not against it. That's how things work. So anyway, that's it's a shock to the system that all this stuff happened, but after a while you get used to it.
You get used to it.
Yeah, totally.
It's weird to think now that Transformers got a film a year prior to Iron Man, for example.
Right.
It's hard to imagine now, or even then. But it's a weird odd thing. It's strange for us as well, having been fans since we were little kids and having grown up with it as well. It is also strange in that regard. So. Yeah. I just had, if you don't mind, just before we sort of wrap up and everything, just to go back a notch, just to some of the very beginning, if you don't mind. I know we talked briefly about the sort of initial creation process of some of these names and things like this. I really wanted to ask about some of the toys that you had at the time. Presumably they were all the Japanese versions that were given to you. I know you kind of went away for the weekend or what have you. Where did what was your first thought when you were just sat looking at these things that you had to kind of turn into characters and things like this? What was your initial impression of it all?
Well, I thought they were very clever that that this thing that the car turns into this humanoid robot, or this thing that's a jet fighter or a gun or whatever. So it was very clever toys. I frankly did not play with them. I did not take them out of their boxes and start manipulating them. I just thought they were clever. But I mean, I was 29 years old back then, so I wasn't into playing with toys. But I appreciated the skill that went into them, the creativity, and I just looked at it as a creative challenge.
Yeah.
This toy goes from form A to form B. My job is to create a character around that transformation, who that toy is. That was it. It was a creative challenge. This guy's a bad guy. This guy's a good guy. And I had a facility with words because I was into crossword puzzles heavily back then. I still am. So I felt like I was up for the job. I could mash together different words and come up with a feeling and hopefully the right feeling. And so it was, and I hadn't started at Marvel the day before. I was working there for 7 years by then. So I had a pretty good feeling for what goes into creating, fantasy, sci-fi heroes and villains.
Well, I think that's it, and I think the vibe of it is something that really obviously struck a lot of kids, back then, and has continued to do so. And the fact that I suppose that was just something that interested me because those names that you applied in that one weekend or whatever are still names that are hanging around now and are used all the time, and they're still those original 84 characters are still some of the franchise's biggest names. So it's just kind of crazy to think that it was
I should add while we're talking about names and Hall of Fame. So overall, I created about 250 names.
Yeah.
Wow.
Your audience should be aware of that. So over the 5+ years I worked on the property.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. As really my sort of final question that I wanted to ask, are you aware of, and you may not be, so feel free to tell me, but are you aware of the term Buddyansky-isms?
I think so. It's like a Furmanism, right?
It's like a
Yes,
feminism.
exactly. Yes, very good.
Very
Yes.
much
Yes.
like a feminism.
Simon
But
and I were
I didn't know
talking
if you
about
knew
this
this.
recently, actually.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Just little
Apparently,
writing.
he's more guilty of it than I am, but I have.
Oh,
Yeah.
by some metric, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, Simon is famed for it.
Yeah.
It's fair to say. But you have a couple, I think, and it's just like any writer, I guess, isn't it?
Right,
It's
right.
sort of
You fall
little,
into certain patterns of words, and you don't even
Yeah.
realize you're doing it. But yes,
Totally.
yeah.
aware of that.
I think your most famous one is have some whatever it is courtesy of my weapon, a weapon of choice, whatever the weapon is. So
Now I'm blushing. Okay, I'm.
yeah.
You need to get that on a t-shirt, Bob. That's what you should do. You know,
Yeah.
just get branded.
I just didn't know if you were aware
Yes,
of the term Buddyansky.
I did come across that in some article a few years ago, and and like I said, just recently, I think Simon and I were at the same Transformers convention in outside of Toronto back in July, and I think that topic came up between us. Yes.
Yeah. He's certainly much more guilty of it. It's fair to
Yeah.
He
say.
never showed up tonight.
No,
so-
it's
no,
going to be
no.
in the future. That will be a future.
different night.
Yeah,
different
that'll be.
night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That'll be a future.
we will hopefully.
He's too
have
busy
Mr.
doing his
Furman
own
on.
podcast at the moment. We've got to get him off that first. You know.
Yeah, exactly. This is
Busy
assuming
guy.
that he wants to come on after Jason accosted him at the
In the bar.
He was all
Yeah.
in, I'm sure. You know, I'm 6'5".
You didn't
Bob,
give him
so
a
I kind of
choice.
slightly scared him. Yeah, I know. Sorry,
Yeah.
Bob. Yeah.
He was taking a sip of his pint at the time.
He
as you
was,
strode
I
up
know.
to him, but
Yeah, totally.
yeah. Well, anyway, Bob, listen, we don't want to outstay our welcome or keep you
Yeah.
or what have you. So it just remains for me to say a massive thank you.
Huge
for
thanks.
Yeah.
the time. Honestly, it's been absolutely fascinating to chat to you
Wow,
about it.
well, it's
all.
been a
So,
pleasure for me too, and it's nice to talk to all three of you. And it's been
It was fab.
it's been a fun time.
Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Yeah,
Okay.
really
Yeah, thank you so
appreciate it.
much.
Thanks so much, Bob. Amazing.
And
You're welcome.
thanks for all the wonderful stories.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. I'm happy I was able to write them back then.
Well, we
We do it.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Superb. Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Well, I enjoyed
Awesome.
it. All right. Well, have a good evening, guys. Bye bye.
Right, well, it's that time for the part of the pod where we talk about our sponsor, and that is tonight, tfsource.com. There for all your Transformers and third-party needs. And tonight, we're going to do what we always do, which is look at what they've got in stock and available for pre-order right now, choose a toy, and waffle about it for 5 minutes or so. And I think it's kind of appropriate, given the setting
Yeah.
tonight, to do
It is.
something a
Yeah.
bit classic, isn't it?
It's the one
It is.
of the ones Bob killed.
Multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah.
And defined.
True. Yeah, he murdered this guy. He didn't say
He
kill.
didn't really kill him.
He didn't say
No.
kill. He said
Saved
Put him on a
to-
floppy
Take-
disk.
He
Yeah,
took
put
him
him on
off
a
the
floppy
board.
disk.
He
Yeah,
took him off the
exactly.
board. Exactly.
Imagine getting all of Prime's head into a floppy disk. Anyway,
Yeah.
Saved him for a new
separate.
toy on a rainy day.
Exactly. It's,
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of new toys, new Optimus Prime toys, it's
Mhm.
Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime. And this thing looks pretty swished, doesn't it? It's fair to say.
Yeah, it's great.
Well,
man.
do you know, it would be an immediate buy from somewhere. If I could.
TF
TFSource.com.
TFSource.
There they go. They've got it in stock.
They've got it up for
Yay.
pre-order.
Yeah, that's
Not quite
true.
in stock yet, but it's
Yeah.
up for pre-order,
Up
which
for
is
pre-order.
good because I don't think any of us have
We've
it
all
on
missed
order.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
We all missed out. Yeah, Evan was showing it off last episode.
on the
wasn't
middle
he?
of the pod.
Yeah,
I know.
gloating
I'm so
about
jealous.
it. Honestly, I mean, you design a toy and then you get to own it. How unfair is that? You know?
But this is, for you guys, this is going to be an absolute joy, isn't it? Because just look at
Yeah.
the posability of this guy. It is
yeah,
off the scale.
it looks
It's just-
immense.
It does.
Yeah.
It looks superb, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. I mean, there's been so much fanfare about this thing since it was unveiled.
Hmm.
And I think it's kind of funny because you can tell it's a good toy, a good looking toy, because when it was first announced, okay, they're going to make a Studio Series Optimus Prime, I did read, not unanimously, but there were certainly a few
the same
comments.
people going, no, another. Do we need
Exactly.
another Optimus Prime?
Oh,
and then
another one.
everybody bought it.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is
Like,
this
oh,
for? Everybody who wants it.
Earthrise is still good, guys, and all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, actually, when the pictures came out, it was pretty well loved.
That's
wasn't
like
it?
us going, oh man, the G1 toy is still great. Why should they ever make another Optimus Prime ever? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's like, look, it's great. People buy it. It looks amazing. I'm going to get it. You're going to get it. You're also going to get it.
I might do. I'm still.
Really?
I'm
You're not
yeah,
sure?
no, I'm
Oh.
not. No, I'm not like not sure, but I'm just, like I haven't got it on order now. Do you know what I mean? And,
Yeah, same.
You know,
True.
so
I don't collect Studio Series.
well,
yet.
I don't technically. So
You've
you
been
know,
buying legacy stuff left, right, and centre. Get
not
yourself
left,
a
right, and
nice-
centre. Honestly, like I've got some, but I wouldn't say left, right, and centre. I don't
Sideburn?
have. I don't have any.
That
Yeah,
one?
Sideburn. Yeah,
What was that? What was that other
one
one?
toy.
Wait. There was another one. There was another one. I definitely saw you had a picture of a couple.
Go on, name it then. Come on, if there's so
Oh,
many,
no, I can't.
pick
That's
a
why I asked
name.
what was the other one? What
Just
was
you
the other
know. Well,
There were
no,
too-
you're the one
there were
saying
too
it's
many.
left, right, and centre. Choose another
You've got
one.
like the Scrabble of legacy toys. There's so many.
Sure,
Scrabble.
so many.
Actually,
Choose the
it's like-
second one.
It's like Toy Foo all over again with the snow blindness. I can't even tell you because there's so many. I can't
Right,
see.
exactly.
Yeah.
Just inundated with them, mate. Yeah.
You're in a sea of legacy toys. Do you know what they call it?
Go on.
A legacy.
Oh no!
I regret this sponsor segment immediately.
Yeah, I know.
Honestly.
Can I bring us back on track and do some big
Studio Series.
series?
Ah.
Series, yeah.
He's getting it. That's
There
because
we
he's got
go.
so many of
Yeah,
them.
there we go.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think. Do I have any of the Studio Series line? I've got a repaint of Jazz.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, see?
yeah.
I got the orange Jazz.
The orange
Oh, the
jazz.
G2 one.
And
The legacy
I
one.
have Grimlock. Actually, I have Grimlock.
So, here we go.
This is-
Look, it starts to expand. Oh yeah, I've just got
Just a few. Just a few.
Yeah, that's one.
Can I just point out one wee tiny thing?
No.
no. Right, thanks, and yeah, thanks TF Source.
That's
for all
the
your
end of the
sponsorship
sponsor
and
segment. Yeah.
needs and all that sort of stuff. Whatever he
Exactly.
says.
Thanks so much. Moving on.
No.
Go on then. What
Cheerio.
is it? What is it?
It's not big hater
Old
energy or
downer
anything.
Jason
I'm
again.
sorry.
Here we go.
But
Careful.
it just does make me giggle a little bit because I've just seen it now. But you know the image
Ugh.
from the movie. He's in his alt mode and he's got his little booster flames coming out of the underneath of the truck. Yeah, that
Right.
image.
It looks like
Yeah.
he's run over a traffic cone.
No, do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Ben Grimm from the Fantastic Four. His feet. That's what it reminds
Okay.
me of. Yeah,
Yeah. Thing
Yeah.
feet.
Grimm feet. That's what it is.
Like Hulk hands, but
Yeah,
thing
grim
feet.
feet.
Fiendish feet.
Fiendish
Yeah.
feet.
Like the
That's what it
others.
is. You know, I just find them a little bit. I know what they're doing, but
Mrs. Grimm's baby boy's feet.
it's not an accessory I'm that bothered about.
It's funny that they're the flames and you're not going for the Human Torch. You're going for the thing. I mean,
just the thing's feet.
But I can see what he means. I think it looks like he just ran over 2 traffic cones.
it does a little bit.
It does a little bit. as well.
Or that Whizbit. Anyone remember Whizbit?
I do remember Whizbit.
One person out there will be like, someone referenced Whizbit.
Yeah.
Jason was that guy.
No one's saying that. No one's saying
Whizbit grew
that.
about
Jason
3
did.
feet high.
Yeah.
Ha
Yeah,
ha,
that-
this away.
there
Ha
we go.
ha, that away.
Wow, Jason, amazing.
Jason, this is important to acknowledge. You know that you can leave them in the box, right? You know
I
that
do
that
know
is-
that. That's the
an
thing.
option.
So it's not. Yeah, it's fine. And I just find it kind of funny that it reminded me of that. Still
Yeah.
love it. Still an amazing.
Jason,
figure.
you can leave him in the box. You can leave him in the cardboard box.
Just like his trailer. Hey, there we go.
Good
Yeah,
God. Good
nice.
God.
Leave him in the
Oh,
box.
this is
Leave him in the
80s.
cardboard box.
To be fair, there's not really much else to say about this toy that hasn't been said already, so we may as well have whatever nonsense this is as our sponsor
The
segment.
roller's
I
quite
suppose.
wee as well. A little mini
It's
roller.
a wee roller.
Right.
Wee roller.
Okay, if I think it looks great, but I do have one critique, and it's only one thing that really
Grey
put me off
roller.
initially. No, and this is going to be the nichest critique anyone will ever hear on this toy,
Oh.
and it's the shape of the thighs.
Ooh.
They're very rectangular.
They're not the air. They're
In
they're
the
not
cartoon,
very round.
they're kind of curved, aren't they? And I think that it threw me at
Mhm.
first. I was like, it took me a little while to kind of get that because it's like, he just looks very straight. And if he's trying to look like a cartoon, I think it needed to be thinner and curvier. But
So would
it
you
still
would you
looked
say
great.
they're seductive thighs or not so much?
Silence.
I don't know where they rate on the thigh scale.
I mean, if it was Megatron, they'd have to be pretty seductive, of course, because that's a requirement. I think
Yeah. As he's got 2, maybe it's thigh versus thigh.
that's a thinker.
Come on, Jason.
Oh, Spy versus Spy.
Yay! The video game.
I was getting
There
there. There's a lot of triangular hats
that's
going on
it.
tonight, isn't there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
we go.
this
Whizbit,
is-
we've got thigh.
We need Orko next, and then we've got them all. You know.
No, we don't need it.
But I think that's my only real critique, and it's such a small
No,
niche
fair.
one. It's one I wouldn't really bother to vocalize except for on a podcast if I had that kind of
Yeah,
power,
yeah.
apparently.
Yeah.
I just think it's remarkable. I know we spoke with Evan about this toy last
Yeah,
time.
it looks
and,
amazing.
uh,
Absolutely,
it does.
knocked
It
out
really
of the park.
does. I think it's incredible. I think it's quite noticeable how much like MP44 it looks like,
Yeah.
you know, but it's also
How much better
interesting.
than MP44 it looks as well.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, but
Mhm.
no, I actually think it does have some strengths over MP44. I would agree, actually. I love MP44. and I think it looks fantastic. But I do think this has some strengths over it as well. But yeah, superb. Honestly, just yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's one of the few figures that I feel the Energon axe and the little attachment to the gun as well works actually really nicely, because it is such a posable, at this scale, it's such a posable figure. I can't wait to get it in hand and just have a play.
Ooh.
I really love what they've added to the mix here, because every great toy adds something new rather than just emulating the old. And here you've got the combat drone being able to go the combat deck drone being able to go on top of Roller, which I thought was quite a fun little.
Also from MP44, by the way.
Yeah, MP44 does do that. It's true.
Does it? I thought it popped up on its own. It had the wheels. Did it?
Also does that.
What, attaches the Roller?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I take it all back. Well,
yeah.
Sucks.
Looking pretty good right now, MP44, isn't it?
No, never looks good. What are you talking about? Just looks expensive and broken. But
Sure. Yeah, I love how this is like a really nifty feature that you've just highlighted, but then as soon as it's in reference to MP44, you're like, nope.
Not today. His little side tanks are quite angled as well, aren't they? Is that
what on his
alt mode
side of his legs? Yeah, they're always like that, aren't they?
Is that like the animation kind of?
That's pretty standard for those, I think.
I also like how his feet fit on the trailer door, like exactly. It's like the molding continues down.
Oh yeah, when he's standing on it.
Yeah, it's quite fun.
That is cool.
It's like he's in Clark's having his feet measured, you know.
It really is like that, isn't it? It does look really good.
Those little bits that tickle your toes when they push it in.
God, Americans would have no idea what Clark's is, would they? It's a shoe shop.
Shoe shop.
Transformers shoes in the 80s.
I'm pretty sure, Liam, Americans probably don't have much idea of a lot of what you're talking about at the best of times.
So niche.
But
that's why
dearie me.
Plenty of them still listen to the pod, so I don't think we need to worry about it, honestly.
Stay tuned.
So, yeah, exactly. But yeah, do go and check this thing out. I mean, I'm sure most of you probably have it on order already. It's probably just us three that the three last people in the fandom not to order this toy.
I want it. It looks so good. It looks amazing.
It looks amazing.
But you can go and get it for yourself now. It's available for pre-order on tfsource.com. Go and check it out for all your Transformers and third-party needs.
We now return to the Transformers.
Right, well, that's going to about do it for the podcast tonight. And, again, big thank you to Bob for joining us. What a legend, right? Gents, that was quite the privilege to be able to sit and chat with him.
It was amazing. It was just
an
absolute hero.
Really good dude, man.
Yeah. Very easy to chat to as well. I mean, even before we hit the record button, we were having a little laugh with him and stuff. And he's just very friendly, very welcoming. But you can tell as well, we were just saying, you can tell that he's had a lot of these chats before and things like that. And he's obviously kind of become aware now of, I don't know.
He's well versed, isn't he?
Yeah, the interest behind a lot of these stories and things. It's absolutely fascinating.
It's nice.
It's funny when we do this, because like I think obviously we all read the comics as a kid, but for you guys it's way bigger. So for me, but he's a massive influence on my childhood through things like his time editing comics like Daredevil and Spider-Man, because that was the stuff I really gravitated towards.
Same though. I mean,
so that's for me. Like I remember, like when the very early 2000s, when I was first reading interviews with him, he's talking about Daredevil and things, and I was like, "Whoa, here we go!" And then it's like, but he's also Transformers, obviously, and it's like it's big into that too. But it's just kind of incredible speaking to him. And
same for me. I mean, I grew up reading Spider-Man as much as I read Transformers. You know, I loved Spider-Man comics through the time that he was, editing them, and Daredevil to a lesser extent, but still, but certainly Spider-Man. So I would love to have asked him more questions about.
Oh, I would love to have
about that era.
Secret Wars 2.
Yeah,
totally.
Very much really behind that, and I would have loved to have spoken to that.
It would have been fascinating.
So the Beyonders jumpsuit. Where did that come from?
that was a choice. Yeah,
absolutely.
What was the inspiration there? Yeah,
that's great.
It was
really good.
The style at the time. But I would have loved to chat to him about the Clone Saga and everything there as well, and more. But we were obviously trying to be very respectful with his time, and I think he had a good time.
Like the way you threw in this had a little renaissance, and it's almost like there's some people who like it now, like this guy. That's a shot at me, Sixo. That is.
No, it's not just you. It's not just you. It's big. It's big now. It's definitely gone. The tide has turned on the Clone Saga.
I liked it at the time. I was there.
I liked it.
I was there, man. I lived it. I loved it.
Yeah. I never had a problem with the Clone Saga. I never. This is not the topic for tonight, but I never felt like it was really that bad. It had its moments where you were like, where is this going for sure? And it did drag on a bit, but some great stories in there as well.
I still have every single issue of every single Spider-Man book that ran through the Clone Saga.
Right.
It's literally like hundreds.
Mm.
Because there were 4 issues at the time. I think it was 4, one for each week.
There was 4 books, yeah.
Amazing, spectacular, and I want to say astonishing. And then stuff like Tales of Spider-Man.
There was a couple of books. There was some
The
that
Lost
came
Years.
and went, wasn't
Peter
there?
Parker, The Lost Years, and stuff like that.
Yeah. There was lots, man. It was what a time. What a time.
Do you know what's more important, actually, though,
Go on.
that you two need to be aware of, is that Bob and myself got a haircut for tonight.
On the same day,
Okay,
yes.
on the
You
same
both got
day.
haircuts for the
So,
occasion.
you know,
Yes.
it's like, guys,
Are you going to remember
seriously.
this next year? It's going to be the anniversary of that day. Jason got
Haircut
a haircut.
day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. Liam, I know just you won't have heard this because you were a little bit late for the recording, but you know,
Oh, there we go. Another shot.
gotta get that in there.
Yeah.
I was on at exactly 9 o'clock. Exactly 9.
901, but that's,
901.
you know,
Exactly 9.
901.
And that's because I couldn't
uh,
find the bloody Zencaster link anyway.
Yeah, and we did
We
say
hide
that
it. We
we
hide
did
it
say
from
that we'd be on at 8:45 to be early, but that's
we?
you know, yeah, we did, yeah, but that's
Were
fine.
you went at 8:45?
Yeah,
Oh, right. I think you said 9.
no, it's fine. But I'm only kidding. I'm only joking with you. But it was
Yeah.
funny because I got to listen to 15 minutes of Bob and Jason chatting about their haircuts.
Yeah, that was
Ah.
us. Yeah, we were just like shooting
Oh,
the
it was fascinating.
the
breeze.
The breeze, that's the word. My
The
brain is
breeze.
now deactivating. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Haircut chat. There we go.
yeah.
That nice.
It was fun. No, it was
Yeah.
what a legend and a real privilege as well. So we are
Yeah, it was
very very grateful to Bob for just his time and everything that he's contributed. So, but if you've enjoyed the chat tonight and you want to get more like this, I mean, we have interviewed other creators. We are going to be interviewing many more creators and Transformers people up and coming. And you may just want more general chit chat from us. You probably want to get on our Patreon, it's fair to say, isn't it, lads?
You should, because you can go on the Discord, which is where I'm looking right now, and I can see for a fact that you were not on there at 8:45.
Yeah, and you would be checking.
Wow.
Jason today at 20:51. I'm online, handsome chaps.
Yeah.
Jason
All
at
right.
20:52.
Actually,
Bob is here with me.
I will.
Yeah.
I will acknowledge
Yeah.
that. I think
Yeah.
I was on just as Jason was typing that.
Oh, were
so-
you?
Uh,
Were you?
yeah.
You were on at 20:54. I was keeping an eye on that.
Oh,
there we go.
So I didn't want
Mr.
to. I didn't want
There
to
it
call
is.
you out there.
All
but,
right. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We get to the
But, yeah.
truth.
It's
Yeah.
true. So yeah, Bob and I were
You,
just having
you
a
got the
separate
4
chat
and the
about
5 the wrong way round. After
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fine. I'm editing all of this bit out anyway, Liam.
Yeah,
so don't worry about it.
Yeah, just modify it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Brilliant.
People will never
I
know
would have
the
got
truth.
away with it too if it wasn't for that pesky Liam.
Yeah, I am looking though as well. When I did tag you with 3 exclamation marks, and that was
That's when I
today
was
at
logging in,
2100.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally saw it as I was clicking join. It was funny.
Yeah, it's funny.
Soapbox,
It's good.
Soapbox, where are you? Yeah.
It's exciting.
Get here now.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
yes, you do want to get on our Patreon,
Yeah.
and you can get on our Discord as well. I mean, we have 5 glorious tiers of stuff. You know all of this by now. If you're a regular listener, you know we've got, several levels. The big ones are you can get on our Discord light, as it were, from some of the lower tiers. You can get Discord full from Inner Beast, or you can get access to exclusive content once you get up to 6 Butler. You can get access to fortnightly minisodes and Goldbox Classics, where you can get access to fortnightly mini-series as well. And we've got plenty of good stuff coming up. It's going to be a very exciting time for Triple Takeover. Lots of different chats and things going on. We've got Liam's Tatman firing on all cylinders. We're going to have Maz coming on for some stuff. Raz coming on for some stuff. It's all happening. Fair to say.
all happening. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to be awesome.
Mm.
Yeah,
It is.
superb stuff.
It is. And we got one new patron this time, don't we, Jason?
We do. And we know this gent as well. It's
Yeah.
Jamesy, who's coming in at 6 Butler. So welcome, Jamesy. Lovely.
He knows what's good.
Yeah.
He's a good lad, is Jamesy. Even though he's an
good
Aston Villa
lad.
supporter,
Yeah.
but he's still a good lad.
Dear oh dear.
No football here, Liam. No football
Yeah,
here.
exactly. Football-free zone.
Exactly.
So-
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's not bad considering that actually it's only been about like 3 days since we recorded the last episode, isn't it? So
It's true.
It's just the
Yeah,
way
that's
it's
a good
worked
point.
out.
I know,
But
totally.
yeah. So yeah, welcome to the Discord and everything, Jamesy. Good to have you on board.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's lovely.
That's a good
we have a
egg.
we have a pod question for night as well.
Do we?
Gents, we do. Yeah.
Is it about Spider-Man?
It's not actually. It's a bit more kind of on brand with the podcast, actually.
Ooh, Daredevil.
getting
Kenner?
no
Batman?
further away. Exactly. Yeah.
Pot
Exactly,
Noodle?
yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Monster Munch. It's from Perfect Pixel. From our patrons, obviously, and here it is. Got a pod question for you to add to the pile. Combining Dinobots, yay or nay?
Sure, why not? Slap the sods together and have done with it.
I'm going to say nay.
Ooh.
And the reason I'm going to say nay is I think the Dinobots are great figures in and to themselves, and we don't need more combiners. We got enough combiners, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay, but you've got to go back and do the nay again. You've got to do it like the film. Nay. You can't just say like nay.
Yeah, Liam's
Nay.
was better, man. Liam's
Yeah.
that was pretty spot on. That was like,
Good, wasn't it?
yeah, that was really good. You've been listening to that for nearly 40 years, of course, so
Yeah.
it makes sense that you would
Yeah.
it would be fairly well worn into your brain. I must admit, I'm kind of with Jason on this one. Like, look, don't get me wrong. I don't poo-poo the idea in the respect of like it should not happen. Like, I'm perfectly fine with it happening. And like the core class, was it Volcanicus?
Yeah.
I think it looks great. I think they look awesome as little individual guys, super cute. I like the fact that they combine in that. I've seen it done before, but for me personally, like as a preference, I'm fine without them combining, and I think it's probably better. I was kind of like the idea that it was like the Dinobots as individuals versus Devastator or Predaking or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And that it was like this great big Behemoth. I've done it again.
Behemoth, yeah. Behemoth.
Behemoth, yeah.
Bringing back the Behemoth.
Behemoth.
A Behemoth.
Behemoth.
It's
Wow.
my special word for behemoth. I don't
I
know
love
why.
it.
I've got
Yeah.
Sixo lingo over
yeah,
here.
got
That's
a
great. I love
bit
it.
of a mental
It's like
block with
Duolingo,
that
but
one there.
Sixo lingo.
But you see, I corrected it, so it's fine. But yeah, but the behemoth.
Mhm.
I'm
That's
doing
the
the
one.
air quotes thing now. Behemoth,
The big robot.
as some people like to say. Yeah, I just thought it was fun that it was like they were these super powerful individual guys that went up against a big man. Basically, that always
Yeah.
kind of appealed to me.
You know what? Like when they first did it, I was a bit like, but then afterwards, I thought they're probably the most suited team to be in the combiner because they are always sort of, I don't know, like in the cartoon, portrayed as being very dim-witted. So as a combiner,
Simple brains.
combining their intelligence.
They'd be more dim-witted. That's the whole. It would go the other way.
No,
you
but
know?
surely it's not like, say, the Stunticons or other ones where there's several different forces of will coming together and personalities
Oh.
clashing here because there's less there. So you think they'd be more suited
Wow.
to being
Less is
like
more.
a-
I like this positive vibe we're getting here. This is good.
But
yeah.
that's the idea, isn't it? Like the idea is a lot of the other ones they can't get on, and they are too busy competing
Yeah, okay,
with
I
each
see where
other,
you're going.
and so
Yeah,
the
totally.
personalities don't mesh, and they're always
Yeah.
they won't combine into one personality. Whereas the Dinobots aren't quite on that same sort of
They
Yeah,
all want to
yeah.
smash stuff, don't they?
Yeah.
So-
It
yeah.
would
They're
just-
all
it would
very
just be
they have the
Swoop
same
who was-
goals,
yeah.
and there's not that same sort of ego or conniving nature or anything. You feel
Although,
like
I
they'd be
don't know,
more suited
Grimlock
to that kind of thing.
wants to be
They just
king.
want to be bigger and more smashier.
Yeah.
Mm.
More smash. I love it.
More,
It's
more
Hulk,
smash.
basically.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Stompy.
Yeah. Stompy.
That's what they'd be called, Stompy.
Stompy guy.
Well, it's Volcanicus, isn't it? That's the
Yeah,
typically
true.
accepted combined form name.
Yeah, it's a good name.
I don't know. Again, I'm fine if it happens. For me personally, my preference is not.
Yeah.
Is the thing,
Same.
and I'm gonna stick with that.
I think where I don't like it is when it's put into toy form and it, sort of not ruins the toys, but you know what I mean, kind of compromises the toys in some
Yeah.
way. To like the Power of the Primes ones, I was never that fussed by the combine mode. It was pretty terrible, but like and the individuals I don't think were as well served for combining. It's like they're not quite there, but the core class ones are great and they're really good fun.
Yeah. They're very wee though, aren't they?
Well, yeah, they're core class. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
core class is
Yeah,
small, right? That's
yeah.
the
small.
That's
SMOL.
Not
Small.
far away, Jason.
Yeah,
Not far
exactly.
away.
Just I got to check these things, right? That's fine.
I just love that. I've got this mental image now of you buying a core class toy and it arriving and being like, "Why is it so tiny?
Why is it
What's
so
happening
tiny?
here?
I
This doesn't
know."
scale with anything."
Exactly. It ruined it. Exactly.
Yeah, they're purposely small. Yeah, it's fair
Yeah.
to say. But no, I don't know. I just love the individual Dinobots. I'm just
Yeah.
Well,
know?
let's throw it back to the Discord as well, then.
Hmm.
And to our fans. What do you
They're
think?
also, when you think about it as well,
Fans.
they're also one of the only combiner teams with a very unified color scheme. They fit in with the
It's true.
Constructicons, Predacons,
Predacons.
it's always the larger ones that have that. So that kind of fits. Man, I sound like I am for this, whereas I don't.
You
really
do.
Care. I
You-
prefer
you-
them
You sound like you really
separately.
care.
Yeah.
actually,
You're absolutely for it. Yeah,
I
that's-
just think like I can't see a reason against it other than my own personal my own personal distaste. But when you think about
I'm
it,
not
they have
bothered.
everything going for them that a
Mm,
combiner team would have. Even the names are all very team-like, aren't they?
it's true. So where do you stand on it, Discorders and other people? Are you completely 100% hate the idea, like Jason? You're bringing a big hater energy. Are you entirely in favour of it to the point of absolutely loving it, like Liam? Or are you
Well-
a classic fence sitter, completely in the middle,
Like 6-0.
centrist vibes like Sixo? Where
Splinters up your arse.
There we go.
You know,
Yeah, there we go.
ineffectual centrist. You know, that's,
Ron Seal
where-
on your pants.
where do you fall on all of that? You know, you got to pick a position. This is the
Straddle
thing,
that
so-
fence. There you
Yeah,
go.
exactly. And then I can never be wrong.
We also need to come up with a name for the Discord people. Like you said, Discorders, but they need like a catchy
Fam.
Discordicons or
Discord. I was going to
Discordians.
say you got to
Discord- oh,
Discordians
yeah.
is
Yeah.
quite good.
Discordians? That sounds
Discord,
like an
yeah.
accordion.
It
Yeah.
does,
Yeah.
but that's
It
yeah.
also sounds like a classic historical era, like Edwardian or Georgian.
Yeah.
In the pre-Discordian era of time.
Disco bots. Disco bots.
Poppers.
DISCOs.
Should we put it
Poppers.
out? We
The
should put it out to the
poppers.
Discord. Let's do. I'll put forward disco bots. And then you
I don't
can-
think
we'll
people want to
get
be called
everyone to vote.
poppers, you know.
Poppers.
Yeah.
Go
Six
with
was poppers. Liam, what was yours again?
Discordians.
Discordians. Okay, right.
They're
we'll
all
put it
going to
out.
vote for Poppers.
It sounds like something that you would say on the
Disco
Crystal
bots.
Maze, doesn't it? You know, Discordians. So, cool.
Shan't say what Poppers sounds like, but
It sounds like something people take in a nightclub.
Well, it is.
that was what I was. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I
wasn't-
mean.
That's what
That's
the
why
kind of
people
thing I
are-
was saying. I'm not going to say what it sounds like, but we've just said it. So there you
Probably
go.
like, don't sniff me. Please don't sniff me.
Sure. Right. Well, anyway,
Well, yeah.
yeah. If you want to get more chat like this, get on our Patreon, I guess. If that's an advert for it, then go and check that out at patreon.com/triple takeover. And otherwise, gents, I guess it's time to say where you can be found as well. I mean, for me, I'm anywhere that there's an app.
No.
On social media, on the interwebs.
God,
Don't know about
He's
yourselves.
stealing all you got to copyright this stuff, Liam.
he's been
Honestly,
stealing this for ages now. He hasn't even got any new material to steal.
See, new listeners won't even know. That's the thing. They won't know whose it is.
Do we have new listeners?
Yeah, we've got new listeners. Well, check the stats. New listeners all the time.
New listeners coming out of the walls. They're coming out of the goddamn walls.
Exactly. Yeah. Where can you be found then, Liam? Nowhere?
All
He's
over
left.
social media. I'm there.
all over.
Anyway, there,
all over
there
social
happens to be
media.
an at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Toybox, Soapbox.
Yeah,
Go
that's
and look
me.
it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about yourself, JSwags?
You can Google Jason Wagner, and I've just done it myself whilst we were chatting, and Jason Wagner Transformers now comes up as an autocomplete. So something's working
Do you often Google yourself whilst we're chatting?
all the time.
Right.
That's why it's coming up. Got all these VPNs, you know.
Exactly. Okay, well, there you go. Go and Google Jason Wagner Transformers. Oh, no, you don't, not Transform, just you.
Just me as well. That
Just
will
you.
also work. Yeah,
And then
that will
you
also
can read about Jason and Transformers.
work.
Wonderful. We should just say, if he's listening back to this, another big thank you to Bob Budiansky for
Yeah.
coming on, because that was a real delight tonight, wasn't it?
Really good dude, man.
It was.
Cool.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Exactly. And next time, it's back to our regular programming, so we'll be back for more of our regular nonsense, but we will have many more guests coming up in the future. We've dropped some of the names before, but we're lining all that up for a future episode, so that's plenty to look forward to in the near future of Triple Takeover, and otherwise, we'll catch you for the next one.
What a ridiculous way to look at things.